Hey everyone, welcome to the next edition of the current edition of our Launch Control webinar series. This one is focused on how to double revenue with your existing leads. We're joined today by Ian Ross from Close More Sales. Ian has an incredible presentation lined up for you guys. We're going to give everybody a few minutes to get into the room, and then Ian will get things started. So Ian, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Doing well. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great. And I'm really excited about this one, kind of as the title of this webinar suggests. One of the things I've always loved about working with you and Steve is that you guys aren't focused on more. You're more focused on most. You really want to
Very
get,
true.
as much as you can out of the existing leads in people's pipelines to adjust profitability and revenue from or optimize profitability and revenue from what you've already got, right? And so we try to take the same approach at launch. We've got, we want people to put 1,000 names into the system and extract as many possible discovery calls as they can. Utilize what you guys teach and what you're going to go over today to close those and turn those into contract deals and end up with just really highly functional businesses. So, with that in mind, of that level of optimization, I think that, you're going to be able to really drop some gems today, which will be great.
I hope so. This is going to be a new training for me that's entirely unique for the launch control audience for this webinar. It's a combination of two things I've run in the past, both of which I've had good success with. So I'm excited to sort of combine them for what makes most sense for your audience. And you're right, we really should probably be called close the most sales rather than close more sales, because more is not usually our goal,
Right.
because so many people focus on volume, which is kind of a vanity metric in a lot of ways. And we would much rather, I mean, we stopped buying houses in February of this year to go full time into training teams and training individuals, which was kind of a hard thing to finally do, but we were thrilled that we did it. So we got to focus on our one great thing in training teams. But before we did that, we were never the largest wholesaling operation and never did the most amount of deals in volume. But I mean, it was in 2021, I think it was, our average assignment fee was $63,000. Like we made more on most of these properties than a lot of the flippers we sold them to, because we did such a good job of asking the right questions to the homeowners to buy at the steepest possible margins, rather than just eking out 10,000 here and 12,000 there.
No, that's fantastic. All right, so I think we're good to kick things off. For everybody listening in, like I just posted this in the chat. The Q&A box is open. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop those in, or you can comment in the chat box. And as we wrap things up, Ian and I will save time for Q&A. We'll go through some of those things. I know I'm going to have some questions myself, but from here, Ian, it is your show. I'm going to sit back, make some popcorn, and enjoy.
Sure. So what we're going to go through today, I mean, it's the focus on doubling your revenue with the same amount of lead flow. And how we're going to break that down is focused on two very important aspects, which is how to text appropriately in a sales context to get someone to respond. So many people are sending out these sort of vapid texts that ask them, are you interested in selling? And just get no responses, or if they get one response and then no engagement after that. We're going to focus on a really key principle that actually gets people to respond. And then we will transition into how to transition out of that, which is that first time on that phone, when you finally call that lead who you just engaged via text. I thought this would be great for the launch control audience, and is something that unique that we've never combined these two different concepts into one individual training. So as we go through this, two things. I've got a thing up here that you can text. I'm going to make this document as I go. So obviously I want to be able to send it to you guys, but it won't be ready the moment I send it. So you can text call to 33777, and we will send you this document probably tomorrow, is by the time I send it off to the team, since I'm typing it up now. And if you have any questions, you don't have to wait until the end to then unburden yourself. Just type it in as you go. It will not be disruptive in any way, shape, or form. I might answer it as I go. I might push it off towards the end. But without further ado, let me share my screen and get into what I want to train you on today. So I've got here, you guys can see this okay? Sales process.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the idea of going from a text lead into a phone call, and that focused idea. So I start it. So again, if you want to get this document, text the keyword call to 33777. Or if you want to see if our team can help you out in any way, shape, or form, that's the number to text, or the word to text that number. So to get into it here, the first question we always have to ask ourselves, because, and this training, to be clear, for some context, came for training the internal disruptor sales team. This is the first part of this, because they, like so many people in real estate, were relying too much on text. They were treating text like something it is not, which is one of the incredibly effective way to get people to raise their hand, to get people who have distressed properties or are in circumstances where they are motivated to raise their hand, to then lead them into a conversation. But instead of thinking about it that way, what an incredible lead source and what point of contact, they were then going, well, let me do everything via text. And then when they're finally ready, I'll call them and talk to them for 2 minutes. And that was the wrong way to go about it. So it started from an internal training and built out from here on this. So can you see it? Can you guys see this? Okay. Good text, all right size there, Michael, you think?
Yeah, looks great. Very,
awesome.
very.
Is it easier to sell over text or over the phone? Right? This is the question we always have to ask ourselves. Obviously, it's easier to sell over the phone for so many reasons. We get to have that interaction. We get to use tonality. We get to talk to the person and be a human being, rather than what so many people fear, which is that they're talking to a bot. They're worried it's a scam. Wait, I don't even know you. Are you in my market? Who are you? We get to have a human-human connection. So it's always easier to sell over the phone. Of course, in person is even easier, but let's just put these two in line, the text to the initial call. So the answer is yes. I'm not even going to type that here because that should be an implied truth here. So if it's easier to sell verbally, our goal should, I'm going to put it in italics, always be to get the prospect. And the prospect is just another word I use for homeowner, right? Someone who's has the chance to become a deal. The prospect on the phone ASAP. Okay. So many people want to rely on text. You want to get them on the phone as soon as possible, because there are 3 challenges, putting in bold, when it comes to text. And they are getting an initial response. One of the first ones here. Getting an initial response is a challenge when you're just sending out massive texts. That's the first challenge there. 2, continuing to engage and keep texting after the first response. And 3, getting them to then answer the phone when you call, right? Because sometimes you might be like, are you interested in selling? And then you call and they don't answer. Right. So like, oh, well, you're saying I should call them right away, but I called them right after they texted and they didn't answer. What did I do wrong? Well, luckily, the right text fixes all 3 of these issues. The single most effective sales text has an underlying principle. So the most effective sales text, which is the goal of sending a text to engage to then get them on the phone, has a single underlying principle. That is, I'm putting in bold, I'm putting in italics. I'm even going to underline it. No, I'm not going to underline it. It looks like horrible. The open loop. Okay. The open loop. What is an open loop? I do this a lot in the documents. It's like, okay, what are you talking about? What is an open loop? Here's an example. Hey, right? This is the blank space here is for their name. So let's get rid of the first comma. So, hey, Michael, this is my name. This is Ian from Stunning Homes. Let's just say, because obviously there's certain things in terms of outreach via text you have to include. But rather than me trying to fit all the criteria of what legally might have to happen in your state with your service provider, let's talk about the principles that we're trying to apply here. You can always make adjustments there. This is Ian from Stunning Homes. Your neighbor, Michael, wanted me to reach out to you. This is an open loop. What I just created is an itch that needs to be scratched. I didn't say, wanted me to reach out to you about buying your home. told me that you would be interested in selling. Is that true? I didn't finish the thought. I created an open loop that the brain's going to go, what about? It gets an initial response. We've got some more examples here. Hey, this is my name. I'm looking at a copy of the tax records at address. This works really well. This works really well in voicemail. This works. It's not. Some people say I'm holding tax records. We don't want to lie, but if you can get access to tax records, which you usually can from any sort of data when you buy, you buy data on skid tracing that property and the information about it, you can usually get aspect to it. This is incredibly powerful for initial point of outreach because they go, what the heck? Well, what are we talking about? We're leaving an open loop that the brain is going to go like, I need this closed, which gets an initial response. One more thing here. Let's say you've already talked to them and you can get them back on the phone, right? Because texting is a huge part of engagement as well, whether or not it's a follow-up or you're reaching back out. Maybe you've talked a little bit, or maybe you've had some type of engagement. So I forgot to ask you about this one thing regarding your property. I am creating an open loop that the brain cannot stand to not answer. Okay, do you want to answer this? You can't stand the idea of not getting into it. This is the key here. So what is the goal? What's the goal of an open loop? The goal, they feel an insatiable need to reply. And the single most compelling intro text that I've ever done, I've worked in a bunch of different industries, selling high ticket, selling insurance, buying real estate, acquiring properties, selling solar. I've done a lot of different roles, tech sales, business to business. There's the single best text that I have ever had that get me engagement. This was the exact text in terms of the automated system. Because then here was the blank for the name. Obviously, using something like launch control, your ability to plug in the name of the lead you have here. That's why it's a blank. This is, I'll just put my name from Disruptors, the name of the company, Close More Sales. You're one of 113 people Steve Trang wanted me to reach out to. This was the single best response I have ever had to a text. It created two loops. First off, why 113? And what did Steve Trang want me to reach about? When you do two, they cannot stand not to respond. It's crazy. So we can take a moment and you can ask questions at the end. Start thinking about how you could do this for yours as we go through this to get this level of response. The open loop is one of the most incredible ways to get people to respond via text. Because rather than via email, which is also a valuable tool to understand how to get someone to respond to you via email, some of the challenges via email is that the effort it takes to send an email back requires a little bit more. I'm going to compose something now and type it up on my computer and press send. People text single words, right? So when you create this open loop, they feel this like, I got to scratch this. Like, what is it? Yes, huh? They respond immediately. This is a really, really, really powerful technique. We can get into this more specific a little bit later if you guys have additional questions. But we want to create an open loop, and two open loops is the most powerful principle. So again, why 113? What does Steve Trang want me to reach out about? I got immediately like 60 responses from those numbers, which is, over a 50% response rate within 15 minutes of sending out a lead. It was actually 113 people who was selling them a certain thing that I thought they were qualified for. So I just crafted this text and the response I got was amazing. So think about how you can apply it to what you're currently doing. At the same time, just in terms of also thinking about what we want to try and do, what we want to be in pursuit of, we also want to think about what are the texts we should avoid, right? Because avoidance of certain techniques is just as powerful, if not more so, than simply what to do, because there can be mistakes in certain ways we ask certain questions. So it could be this one. I was hoping to have just 5 minutes of your time to see if we could talk about making a cash offer on your home. What does your availability look like today? What is it lacking? It screams, can I take up some of your time to try and lowball you? Right? You don't say anything about lowballing, but because it's such a sort of needy outreach of like, is it okay if I take a moment to maybe reach out to you to maybe only have 5 minutes to try and make an offer? Like, chances are you will not be the first investor who has reached out to this homeowner, which means they've dealt with stuff like this before, which means they got an aspect of this that was kind of a lowball offer. And so you're now triggering them in that type of sensation. What else is it lacking? Nothing actually, I'm going to put it in italics, actually compelling in this messaging. Right? There's nothing that actually makes them want to respond. Like, oh, I see 1,000 of these a day. Like, whatever, this is nothing. I have no reason to want to respond to this. You think only 5 minutes of your time, like cash offer, this is super valuable, right? They might be someone who wants to only spend 5 minutes and wants a cash offer on their home. But you have to understand the context with which the message is being delivered. And for someone to respond to this, chances are they're either in such incredible pain, you just lucked into that response anyway. And so you could do an open loop, they still would have responded, you can get it. Or they're probably might even just waste your time. So if any of you are sending texts now, I bet multiple of you, if you've done this consistently, have gotten a lead who said like, yeah, I'll take $1 million. And then you call them up and they waste your time. And how good you are at disqualifying people and running a process that effectively disqualifies someone who's not going to be a fit for us determines how much time you can spend on people who would be a fit. So disqualifying is a way of thinking about making sure you can have the right types of conversations with the right people so that your time is spent effectively. Otherwise, you're wasting time and by extension, wasting money. We all have the same amount of time in a week. We want to make sure we are effective and efficient with that time to close as many deals as possible by not wasting time on people who we should never have talked to in the first place. And ineffective assumption for them to pick a time, right? This is a classic sales technique because we're trying to move the steps along because we want them to pick a time so we know when to call them back and do all that. But if you do it in the very first message, it's not that picking a time is bad. It's doing it in the initial outreach. They haven't even responded. If you start with a request for a time, you are making a pretty profound mistake, which is skipping the initial point of giving them the chance to respond to you and express interest before letting that interest manifest itself in a specific time for you to call them. And so now you're almost skipping a step in the process for them to feel like they're making the decision to have the conversation with you without being forced into picking a specific time. Consumers are far more knowledgeable and informed than they used to be. And this type of like messaging in the first outreach, people are familiar with and rubs people the wrong way. We want to avoid that idea. Which brings me to my next point, which is, I like doing that, which is, let's go to the next page. Oh, is it just skipping to the next page? What's that? What's this? Is that 13? There we go. Okay, I was wondering what was going on there. Which brings me to the next point, which is the fundamental differences between text and verbal, right? And I can teach people exactly what to say all the time, but I would much rather teach you how to think about what to say. So that way you're not relying on pure memorization for every possible circumstance, and instead can be informed on how to think about this so that you can make the right decisions on what to say back and how to proceed forward, regardless of what was said to you. This is what we train. This is like the principle of Close More Sales, which is that I don't want to teach you to memorize how to say things the way I say them. I want you to understand the framework with which to respond so that you can say the best possible thing in your own voice every single time, regardless of what was said to you. So that's why we teach on things like this, like how to think about the differences so that you can be informed. So, am I still in bold? Okay. So, these like the interactions here, these interactions, whether it's verbal or text, are different. And there are things that work in some that we want to avoid in the other. So, what don't we get with text? Right? What are we lacking? Our tone is lost. The nature of this webinar, I get to use tone to express these certain ideas. We don't have tone via text. Reading their reaction is lost. That's far easier in person than over the phone. But for those of you who ever given someone bad news on the phone and waited to respond, and then they respond, they go, "Oh, they took that really well." Not getting to hear their reaction is lost as well. We don't have a camera on them, seeing them read that. We don't know how that message is received. And effective sales is communication, which is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. So we lose reading their reaction to what we send. And techniques that leave a silence for the prospect / homeowner to fill are pointless. And this is a really key point that I'll get to later in the document here, because silence is your friend. We're huge fans of embracing silence when needed. And I'll get to that later on, but that is lost entirely in the texting process. So let's get to a really key point here on how to think about this. It is harder to let an incorrect or extreme, it doesn't have to be incorrect, just extreme sometimes, extreme statement stand than it is to lie to a question. This is a weird concept that most of you maybe have not heard before, so let me break this down. So how does that work? I love asking myself these questions in this document. How does that work? When did you want to get this done by? And this is an example that we had for someone we trained, because he had learned this technique, still asked this question, and got this exact same response, which was answer. No rush. I'm in no rush. Right? How can we build any urgency? How can we move something forward if they're not revealing any reason why they want to get this done or when? Versus you probably wanted to finish this by the end of the year. Now, we're at the end of October and recording this, so this actually wouldn't make sense here. So if it's March, like if it's summer, spring, it's what we want to pick a time frame that's longer. So if it's in October, you probably wanted to finish this by next summer, right? It's picking a longer time frame, so usually 9 months plus that we want to pick. And then they go, answer. No, that's way too long. I was thinking July, maybe August. This literally happened to someone we trained just a couple weeks ago when I made this training after it, which was that he asked, like, so when did you want to get this done? He's like, I'm in no rush. I'm not distressed or anything. I don't need to get this done. I'm okay. And he goes, okay, so if we wait, we got this done in the new year, that'd be fine. He's like, whoa, that's way too long. I was thinking July or August. By making the extreme statement on the timeline, the human mind can't just like let that sit. They want to correct that. So when we're trying to get really important information, that's not going to, burn us in being more extreme, like timeline, guessing, things like that. It is very powerful to assume longer and get corrected so we have the real information. Because a lot of times these homeowners are on guard. They're not even, the first guy wasn't even thinking, he's not thinking, I don't want to tell this guy, though some people do. He just, by being asked as a question, he's like, I'm not in a rush. Okay, well, how about taking forever? Well, no, forever is way too long. I know I need it done. Okay, when? Well, August. Now, why did it take that? We don't know. It doesn't matter. That's how you get people to actually reveal what's really going on. So this is a really key point to understand, which is that when you are extreme or incorrect in your statements, you can get corrected. And there are certain things you don't want to be too incorrect or extreme about because that will offend people. But for the most part, by being like assuming almost like I had a question on it, but there was an assumption in the nature of this question, I was able to get the real information, get the real timeline. This is a really key point that comes up in text a lot. Next level up, which is the best practices via the order of words. This is a really fun concept that you can get lost in some of the text frame for a while. So best practices via the order of words here. So if we were to highlight best practices in text, we want to account for the lack of tone, right? Not the key point up here is that we are missing tone. Tone is lost. So if we want to account for the lack of tone, we got to be extra careful about the order of the words we give things. And I'm going to give a great example here. Here are two examples of basically the exact same question. But the first one requires tonality to not come off harshly. And the second one inherently does not. So here's the first one. I've asked this, and you can ask this in a way that doesn't upset people, but it requires strategic tone. So if this has worked for other people, why don't you feel like this will work for you? That's like, whoa, it's almost accusatory in the way that's said. Now, I can be intentional with my tone to have that get off in a great way, but making it harder on myself versus, again, when we're lacking tone. Why don't you feel like this will work for you if it's worked for other people? It's the exact same question. This one, by ending, why don't you feel like this will work for you, requires tone to not seem accusatory or like I'm diminishing your abilities or you're diminishing your comprehension. But by this one, the order of the words, the exact same question, does not require tone to do that. So I could go, if this has worked for other people, why don't you feel like this will work for you? And I'm fine. But that requires tone that has to be done over the phone. Via text, I want to be organizing the questions and the order of the words within them to be as non-triggery as possible. We want to lower sales resistance, not raise it. And you raise sales resistance when you sound like other salespeople, when you sound pushy, when you sound forceful, and when you sound accusatory. And this is a simple example of, well, why don't you feel like this will work for you? It's worked for other people. It softens the blow by ending on the other people rather than the thing directly for you. That's an example of how tone, I mean, first off, the power of tone, because tone neutralizes both. But when we lack it, we have to be conscious about what we're doing. This is a key thing to keep in mind with text. So if we can type this in mind, we need to be cognizant of the limitations of not being able to soften, which is what I do with my tone for that first one, soften a question or a statement with effective tonality, and or relying on the prospect to fill awkward silence. Okay, so consider the best practices when text is the initial point of contact. Just think intentionally about this, right? Don't do this by accident. So that means we want to keep these things in high consideration. Create a compelling open loop. Call as soon as possible. And the order of words must account for the lack of tonality. Texting should always, this is a really key point, should always be in pursuit of a phone conversation. Because getting someone to sell you their house is something that needs to be done with tonality. It needs to be done with the human interaction, not over text. The text is to get them on the phone, to weed through all the properties, all the data, so you know who to call in the first place. That's the point here. Okay. First, any questions about this so far before I get into now the first start of the call of getting them on the phone?
You guys can pop questions into the Q&A, and we'll take a little pause to answer those if you've got them. And then, yeah, I just want to back up what Ian just said there. Our primary objective at Launch Control is to help you generate discovery calls, right? Because at that point, it becomes the business of real estate investment. And Ian's going to cover a lot of this coming up, but how to convert those calls into closed business. You have a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility when you actually have them on a call, right? So our primary objective is to get you to that point. And so, as he said, text should always be in service of discovery call, or always be in service of pushing to a call.
Ed asked a great question. He asked, do you pass them over to someone to call on the fly or make an appointment for a phone call? So how we always do stuff is call them right away. We call them right away when they answer. And because I would rather set a time when they answer, because if you create an open loop, they're also more likely to answer the phone. That's another key point. But if I'm saying, are you interested in selling your home, and then call, they know what I'm calling about. But if I've created an open loop that they want to close and then they respond, what is this about? And then I call, they're more likely to answer. Right. So I would rather call them right away. And if they cannot talk right then set a time for like, hey, I just wanted to get a chance to chat with you. Call from the same number that the text came from. Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. Because that one of the great points of saying, hey, this is so-and-so, is that at least for the iPhone, it will not say maybe spam or anything like that. I mean, a launch call has amazing things around that, but it'll now say maybe Ian if I say, hey, this is Ian. So I love, if I can, obviously there's always limitations with things, right? There's always limitations with services and what you're doing. But if possible, call from the same number you just texted from, because it just gives you a better chance of them answering. If not possible, say like, all right, I'll give you a call from 610 number, an 847 number, give them something like that, and then call them right away. So they see that if I can. If they don't answer, I would then go to a text and saying, you're probably busy right now. What's a better time? So the process is text, they raise their hand, they seem interested enough to call them. I don't try and set a time right then. If I can, it depends. Some of you have W-2 full-time jobs and you're doing this on the side. There's obviously flexibility depending on the individual, but the ideal process is the second they give any type of engagement, I call them from the same number so they see the name that I texted from. And then if they're busy, then try and set an additional call.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, Ian. And I think something that's important to remember is, although this is a business for you, it is ultimately a B2C communication channel, right? So people, as a consumer, as someone making a personal decision about the home that they own, they're not in a Calendly mindset. They're not in their work mode where they're trying to fill in their calendar for the week and see what they have on tap for the day. Right. This is something where there's emotion involved. And so making that initial call right away to create that level of trust and that level of engagement that you're just not going to get through a Calendly type approach is really vital.
Yes. So, I mean, this has been a big shift for me, going from spending more time talking to consumers and now talking to business owners. Business owners are genuinely busy. And if they're going to get in the frame of mind to talk about a certain service or training their sales team, they're like, we need to set a time to do that. The homeowner, the business to consumer process is a completely different approach. You want to get them on the phone immediately. It was pretty shocking for me realizing how few regular people actually have any aspect of a calendar. As someone who lives and dies by his calendar, like I view my calendar as my boss that just was set by me in a previous time. That's how I think about this. Like my calendar is my boss, and I was my own boss earlier in the day to give myself time blocks. So I have to do this at this time. But the normal person does not do that. So if you're like, everything you do to try and delay the conversation is creating more friction points and more chances for them not to answer, more reasons for them to then talk to someone else in the meantime. If you can prioritize right away. If they're busy, hey, I caught you at a bad time. That's totally fine. Let's set a different time to talk. And we're about to get into that right now. Ed asked, do I always text or you're about to call up? No, I mean, I often just call. But it's also, I'm calling from the number I texted from.
If you can't, because in launch control, you're not going to be able to call from that number that you texted from. You are going to have to call from a different number. So in that case, yeah, Ed, I would suggest that you do that. And the reason why I would suggest it is because they probably are getting pinged from different investors regarding that property. So you want to unify for them that text message that they were just engaging with and that phone call that they're about to receive is the same individual. So they don't see that as separate streams from separate investors. They see that as two pipelines to get to you, a solutions provider that can help them out with their property.
That's a very good point. I also behooves, if you can, if you're texting from a certain area code within the market, you should be calling from that same area code that you text from. At least if the first three digits are the same, if it's a separate service provider, you want to try and keep it consistent so it feels like the same. Because even it might not be the same number that says maybe this, it'll still, if it's is the same area code, it will be able to see more cohesive. So in that case, yeah, I would say I'll be calling you in a moment. Cool. Let's get on to the rest of the training. There's no additional questions. So now, once we're on the phone, let's say we called them right away based on their response. How do we do this from here? So we follow the four main principles of getting past the first 60 seconds of a colder, because this is not actually a cold call, colder call. And these principles apply if it's a cold call or not, but it's simply it's colder because they don't know your voice. Maybe they weren't expecting a call right then, right? They weren't dealing with they don't know who you are, especially if you just text from a different number and you're calling from a different one. We want to make sure we're doing this the right way to set up ourselves up for the best possible chance of really having a conversation with that homeowner to determine if this is a property we are going to be able to buy and if they have problems that we can solve. So we want to make sure we're doing everything oriented around this idea. So I'm going to go through each one here. So one, I'll break each one down as I go forward. Sound like you know them. Two, say your own name as a question. Three, wait for responses. And four, get permission. Okay, so let's break each one down quickly so you can take action on this going forward. So we have much more in-depth training on this type of stuff because obviously it's hard to teach this very quickly in the next sort of half hour or so. But I want to touch on each concept quickly here so at least you can familiarize yourself with this idea, and hopefully there's enough here that you can take action on to have more success. So sound like a friend is the real key here. So the way we do this is we want to be really careful about that very first point of contact. There's a lot of data that getting over really the first 30 seconds is the most important, but it often extends out 60 in using these techniques. This is super, super important because if we get through the first 60 seconds, an incredible thing happens, which is we now start to become a human being on the phone instead of just simply a voice that interrupted their day. What happens when you are a human being, by the pure nature of just extending out that time, you are far less likely to get even though I want this and I know I need to sell my house, I'm busy right now, so click. You lose sudden hangups drastically. And these principles I'm about to teach you, this was one of the very first things I did for disruptors in terms of the training capacity, was we don't offer this anymore, but we had disruptor certified cold callers. These are people mostly from the Philippines, but they were also throughout like Egypt and Costa Rica and stuff, where they were calling homeowners for real estate companies. So they were already well trained. They were on dialers. They were getting training every day. And what my job was to come in there and give them additional training to get them good enough. And then I had to certify them to make sure they were applying the techniques well enough to then charge even more for this third party company that was doing it. And we had pretty profound effects when they actually implemented just these techniques of getting over the first 30 to 60 seconds. Now these people are just sitting on a dialer all day, right? They're just call after call after call. They went on average, they were getting per agent about 40 hangups a day. How do I classify a hangup? A hangup was simply, hey, is this the owner of so-and-so of this property? I wanted to make you an offer on your property there. Click, right? Not, no, you have the wrong number. Click. That's a wrong number. Click. But just a hangup, meaning we don't actually know if this is the homeowner or not, which is really important in terms of a cold call process because now we still have to call that number back. It gets thrown back into the mix again in terms of the dialer, which is a really bad thing if they're not the homeowner. It means we will waste time talking to people who are never going to be a deal because we have the wrong data. How efficient your people are, your cold callers are at the time also matters. So they were getting 40 hangups a day. Once they all implemented this, that went to 4. It went to 4 hangups a day. They still got a lot. They got plenty of no's because if the data wasn't great, But that meant they would spend less time wasting on people who were never going to be a deal because they could have enough of an actual conversation to not just call 10 numbers at a time, click, oh, no, click, hang up, nothing there, gets called again tomorrow, right? They happened to be way more efficient with their time, which getting more no's meant they could get more yeses because they wasted less time. So these principles have had profound impact on people with, frankly, pretty heavy accents calling homeowners across the country. So if you can adopt it, imagine the effects you will have. Wanted to put that here. So now that I've given some context to it, sound like a friend. I always want to sound like you are expecting my call. That comes out in how I start it. Hi, is this John? Versus, hey, John. I always want to sound like I am your friend. I just want to sound like you should be expecting my call. I'm not saying you're expecting my call, but this is a really key principle. I just want to sound like it in pure tonality. There's no lie happening here. But by the very nature of having this happen, a couple things happen. So the tone of that line, which is not asking, is this John? I want to assume I have the number here. But the tone should be that you sound as if they should know you and they are expecting your call. They should know you and they're expecting your call. Not only will you lower that first level of sales resistance, but they, and this has happened a lot, might be embarrassed to admit that they don't know you. Okay. This is when I first trained a lead manager when I had a virtual wholesaling company. When I taught her this concept, it was her very first call. I trained her all week, and then I had her call older leads or less interested leads that I had initially developed to then have a conversation with them. Jordan Belfort style, exactly, Ed. It's very inspired by that concept. In terms of Jordan Belfort, I don't agree with a lot of the ways he tries to transfer certainty in sales with the straight line system, but he's had fantastic tonality training. Great tonality training, huge inspiration for me in thinking about how to be intentional about what I say over the phone. So it's Jordan Belfort style, very much so. So I want to sound, hey, John versus hi, is this John? And when I had my lead manager call this guy, but I remember this call so well. The homeowner's name was Jamal. This was, I think, in the Birmingham, Alabama market. Maybe it was Savannah, Georgia. Those were my two biggest markets at the time. And he called and he cussed her out and hung up the phone in 35 seconds. And I felt bad because it was her first call for me. I was like, oh no, she's going to be in a bad mood. For those of you who've called people and cussed out, sure, we can not take it personally. That's a really cool, important concept to embrace. But also, we're human beings. And when someone's rude and mean to us, you feel it in your chest a little bit. That's a natural thing to realize. So I was worried that she would be upset or afraid to call again. And she made some mistakes in terms of tonality. So I hopped on the phone with her and said, hey, you made some mistakes. I'm just going to call him again right away, and I'll do it the right way. And because it's literally 45 to 60 seconds after you called, he'll give me the same response, and you'll see that I'm okay. I thought he would hang up on me too, and because someone else had just done the exact same script, and he got hung up on, and I'll show that I was okay, so she could learn to be okay. That's what I was thinking. I called him back less than 2 minutes later. And I was just like, hey, Jamal. And he would just immediately went, hey, baby, how you doing? He just started talking to me like I was his best friend. And I was like, I'm good. How you been? And he's like, I'm doing good. And we talked, and it was a lead. Now the numbers were off. Didn't end up buying that property, but it was the exact same script. It was the same 60 seconds in terms of the script that I had my lead manager call. But what was different was how I said it. By sounding like a friend, I got past that initial resistance. He was afraid to admit he didn't know me. And then when suddenly we're having a conversation, I'm a human being, and we're determining if I could buy the property or not. So, might be embarrassed. There's that point here. So this also allows you to be pleasant without being overly fake. Right? I want to sound pleasant. I want to sound like I want to talk to this person because they're expecting my call and this is a friend. That's a really key point. Next, say your name as a question mark at the end of it. So quite literally, picture a question mark at the end of how you introduce yourself. Okay? It's really, really simple. This is a pattern interrupt that scrambles the brain momentarily. Okay. And really key point, unless these homeowners are responding to a paid marketing channel, it's inbound in some way, or you are running an advertisement on TV, drop the name of your company. You can say it in text because there's regulations and you have to, but no one cares about the name of your company. You might be really proud in the LLC you found this. It's such a cool name. They can't wait. They don't care in terms of that first initial call. I want to sound like a friend. I don't want to go, this is Ian. I work for Disruptors. I'm a sales trainer. Like, I don't want to do any of that. Drop the name of your company. It doesn't matter. Okay. It's not important. So in terms of the name as a question. So, hey, this is Ian. Not, hi, this is Ian. This was a really hard thing. This was one of the hardest shifts for the cold callers to get the hang of, because they're so used to the like, hey, is this Michael? It's Ian. And it's completely inversed, just in pure tone, which is, hey, Michael, it's Ian. The brain goes, what the hell was that? What was that? So what happens here is they think, wait, did I know Ian? Was I expecting his call? Okay. What happens when we do this, though, is really, really key. We are creating intentional awkward silence. We are creating intentional awkward silence. Embrace it. If you can get comfortable with silence, you can close so many more deals. Silence is your friend. Okay. And this is another thing that was also hard. This is why I said, in terms of the training these cold callers, these were the principles that got massive results, and why we could charge more for those people when we were doing it, because we had proven results in them just implementing these basic changes. You wait for responses. Don't rush through. I know you might be nervous. You want to get to your next line. You want to say about what you do. You want to talk about the cash offer. Let there be this awkward silence. If you can wait for their turn and be comfortable in the waiting, it becomes a real conversation where you said something, you waited, scrambled their brain, and then they responded, and then you responded back. Embrace that. Don't, when they're silent, continue on. Because first off, they're probably just processing it. What's going to seem like a long time to you was actually probably pretty short in the actual ratio. And then you're likely to talk over them, and then that blows up the whole start of the call. Wait, embrace silence. It may be uncomfortable. In fact, I would guarantee if you're not used to this, it will be uncomfortable. But getting used to waiting in silence will give you a massive advantage. Silence is your friend. Okay, just wait in the silence and let them respond. I never say anything after I said my name as a question until they say something. It might just be, okay, which is fine. That's a response. Now I can continue on. But I don't wait and count to 2 and they didn't say anything and then start speaking. I wait for them to respond. It can be hard to get used to, but it is super powerful if you can do this. And also, it extends out the time. In the very nature, I mean, there's times all the time where I'm talking to someone. This happened not long ago. I was talking to someone about, it was like, I think it wasn't life insurance. It was some aspect of like car insurance. I was switching cars, and I was like, oh, I realized like 6 minutes in, I didn't want to go with this company. But I guess what I couldn't do? I couldn't just go, click, because I spent 6 minutes talking to a human being. By the very nature of the extending out of time, this was a human being on the line. And so I was like, hey, I don't think this is really for me. And he's like, oh, no, I get why you would say that. And he stepped out doing lines. Now, I still had the resolve to know it wasn't for me. But even I, my time is pretty valuable, I couldn't just hang up suddenly because this was a human being on the other end. That's what elongating time allows that person to become, allows you to become, instead of just a disembodied voice who's interrupting their day and wasting their time. You are a human being who's asking them questions. Embrace silence, let that time linger on. So, and lastly here, in terms of get permission. So many people ask, is now a good time for us to talk? Or is now a good time for you? This is, I'm just going to say it. This is wrong. Go for the no to get permission. Okay. So our two favorite ones are either I probably caught you at a bad time, or I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. I probably caught you at a bad time is our most commonly used one. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. It's something we trained some of the biggest home buyers in Collective Genius, and they have a lot of lead managers, and it's all like American millennial women who are like the lead managers for the people in Collective Genius. I've noticed, and they were like trying to. I feel bad saying I probably caught you at a bad time, so they just made an adjustment on their own. They started saying, "I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time," and at least with their voices, they got better results from it. Which we're very open to, like, if the results dictate this is a better way to do it, we will change our thing. So I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. No, that's okay. What is it? No. That's all right. Go ahead. Right? You were use no as a way to get yes, and homeowners will feel more comfortable giving you permission to continue. As in, no, I have a minute. What's this about? Okay. That's really, really powerful. And so to make sure I continue on, so you don't try this and then you don't know what to do. But wait, what if it is a bad time? Right? I think it was Ed asking about do I just call them? What if it is a bad time? Very simple. You have two options now, depending on if they give you a reason that is believable as to why it is a bad time. Okay, not a good time, I'll say. So it's either if they give me a reason that's like, this is a believable reason, I know they don't have time, or the other option is they either don't give me a good reason or they don't give me a reason. That's a really key point. So I'll first give you the good reason so you can understand that. And then that's the one occurrence, and everything else, regardless of whether or not this is something that's like super valuable in terms of the time, or they just don't give you anything at all. This is the other switch. So first, in response to, let's say, yeah, now is not a good time because I'm in the waiting room about to get called in for a doctor's appointment. This is a believable reason why it's not a good time. They have an actual hard cutoff deadline where I can go, the person goes, oh, I'm getting called, I got to go. And that's understandable. I'm not going to be able to get you to sign a document on DocuSign to sell me your home if you have to get called into a doctor's office immediately. Okay. So that's a believable thing for me. In which case I have this response. Like, I understand it's the middle of the afternoon and you have to go shortly. Then we want to use this language. If you were me, is so powerful. Instead of just going, when should I call you back? Make sure you include, it's one of those crazy little mind hacks that helps people actually be honest with you. If you were me, when would be a better time to call back? This is really, really valuable if you do this the right way. So that's if I have a believable time. Every other instance, either not a good reason. Yeah, I can't right now. I'm really tired. That's not a real reason. There's no hard cutoff. Or no, it is a bad time. No reason. Then I do this other instance. So in response to, yeah, now is not a good time. So again, bad reason, so not believable, or no reason. I would say, I understand. I'm calling you on a Tuesday morning, right? That's what it is for me. But the reason for the call today, John, someone who's familiar with the Jordan Belfort will be familiar with the reason for the call today, is I've been trying to reach owner of 123 Main Street, but that's probably not you. Okay. In fact, I'll add this ellipses at the end here to even emphasize how I trail off the tone. So let's break
Yeah.
this down here. Oh, go ahead,
Ian, if
Michael.
you don't mind, one thing I wanted to chime in really quickly is that the
Sure.
if you were me, like from my perspective, why the if you were me works. It's something that I've really learned from you guys that I think is super valuable, is putting them in the driver's seat. And so they're not in a reactive kind of position. But when you say if you were me, now they're in the decision-making role, right? They're giving you an answer, they're driving the ship as opposed to being defensive and reactive. And that positioning of having them driving is super powerful. I've gotten a bunch of examples from you guys on how to do that. It's really great.
Yeah, the more you can make it feel like, hey, this is up to you. Like I can't buy your home if you don't want to sell it. Like if you were me, if you wanted to be me, when would I call you back to finally get a hold of you? Because also if you just go, when should I call you? You'd be like, I don't know. Call me in 10 minutes. Like, you're still gonna be in the doctor. What? Call me at 6. It's like they know they're gonna be at dinner, right? Because they don't want to take the call. But by scrambling the brain a moment, hey, put your brain in my head and I have to get a hold of you. When should I call you? It's like, well, I'm out at this time, so I'll be driving, then you can call me then. Okay. And if I don't want to catch you driving, so that's the last thing I want to do is distract you. When should I call you then? Well, I'll be home at 5. Okay. Well, you call back at 5. Thanks so much for your time. Have a good doctor's appointment. I can call him back at 5. So in terms of this point here, what did I do? I acknowledged and validated how they felt and continued on after acknowledging the time of day it was. I just continued on. So if I go, I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. Yeah, now it's not a good time. But like I understand, I'm calling you on a Tuesday morning. But the reason for the call today, Michael, I have been trying to reach the owner of this property on Main Street. That's probably not even you, though. I just continue on. Okay. So we'll go on here. Once they've confirmed they are worthy of having the discussion, meaning they are the homeowner, right? They're on title. Yeah, that's my property, whatever. I'm the one to talk to about that. Now we get permission to ask questions. So I might be like, it's probably not you. No, that's my property. Okay. Man, I was reaching out. Yeah. So I was reaching out about your property to see if you're even interested in selling it. What am I also not orienting around? See if you want to hear a quick cash offer, because our fundamental, like, our message in how we do stuff is we don't make offers on homes. We say that very like, we don't make offers on. We're here to buy your home, and if you want to have a conversation about seeing if we can help you. But if you just want to get an appraisal, there's someone else I could recommend an appraiser for you. What happens then? They go, well, no, I'm serious about selling. Okay. Well, when were you hoping to get that done? What's really going on there? And now we're reoriented around the question. If I'm saying I want to give you an offer, then what's the natural next step? Well, what's your offer? And then we got to go, well, hang on a second. Well, first I got to learn and blah, blah, blah. So why even why create that level of resistance of inviting them to ask for your offer and then pulling back and going, I'm not sure yet. I have to ask questions. We want to orient around people who want to sell their home, or at least interested in seeing if they are interested in selling. You can't convince someone to sell you their home if they don't want to, but you can beat out competition. You can buy at steeper margins. You can do all of that. I need to determine if you have any interest in doing that at all. And from there, I can continue on. So let's say the homeowner responds in the affirmative, right? Spell homeowner the right way. So if the homeowner responds in the affirmative, I would continue which is the whole point, right? I'm sifting and sorting a little bit in terms of the data here. So the homeowner responds in the affirmative. I will then say, okay, well, do you mind if I ask you some questions about your property to determine if this would be a home we'd be able to buy? That's it. I'm getting permission to ask questions about their property to determine if this is a home we can buy. Not I can buy every home, because we can't buy every home. But whatever your exit strategy is, you can't do every home. I need to make sure I'm orienting even at the start around this kind of like non-neediness mindset. I don't need this deal. I would love to buy your home if it makes sense for you and if it makes sense for us. And my job is to ask you questions and have a conversation about your home, about your circumstances, about your timeline to determine if it will fit our criteria and fit yours. Is it okay if I ask you some questions so I can try and determine that? That's the approach here. So, final takeaways. We're going to the next page, so we'll just skip here. All right, final takeaways. Open loops get responses via text. Okay. The goal should always be a phone call as soon as possible. Assume you're speaking to the right person and sound like a friend, right? Because we always want to. Some people are like, well, I don't know if the date is good. It's okay. Just assume it's that name, and you'll be corrected if you're wrong. Say your own name as a question. Add a question mark at the end for the principal, and it's a little awkward. There you go. And then embrace silence and wait for responses. And finally, get permission to go deeper. This is our document here. If you want to get this, I'll probably clean this up a little bit more. I did my best here, so I might make it a little cleaner. Text call, CALL, to 33777. We'll send you this document probably tomorrow is my guess, and maybe we'll try and get it out later today. I'll see if I can when I send it to the team. I'm not a systems guy. And if you also want to see if we can help out, like if we have anything that we can help you with in terms of your sales conversations, that's also the way to text. So what questions do you guys have?
Yeah, so
That's
any
a lot of
questions, guys,
information
put them in the chat, put them in the QA. Colin, I think you had a question, so go ahead and populate that in the chat, and we'll get to them. Ian, this has been phenomenal. Every time I talk to you, I walk away with, well, thankfully you took notes for me this time, but I walk away with so many usable notes.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, this is really surface level, to be honest with you, Michael. Like when we actually go into the training, it goes so much deeper than this. Because also even there's two things. It's like the problem with sales training is that most people think, well, I've learned it, now I'm good. Right? Like that's the biggest challenge with like teaching information as opposed to like a service provider. Like launch control, you guys are always needed because there's always more leads. But we are always going deeper. We're always solving new challenges, figuring out more things, training whole teams. We have something for if you have conversations where how well you speak in those conversations, how well you text, how well your conversation goes, can determine how much money you can make. In our view, you're in a sales role. We've got something for you.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that like a takeaway from me that I think is really interesting from this presentation is that you and I have talked about A/B testing and marketing a lot, and oftentimes your assumption of what's going to work isn't the thing that really connects with people,
True.
And there's so much of what you just said in here is don't do, which is the default setting for a lot of real estate investors. It's like, do you own 57 Green Street? Right? Because they want to verify that they have the right person. So they're using text as a verification technique instead of an engagement technique. Right. And so that gets the proverbial hang up, right? Like whatever text version of getting hung up on, that's going to get you that. Right. But it seems logical, right? It's a fair assumption. It's not a bad idea. It's a good idea. It's a logical idea, but it's been a logical idea that's been proven to be ineffective. Right. And the same thing with the veil has dropped. I mean, 5-6 years ago, you could say, I'd like to talk to you about a cash offer for 57 Green Street. And the person goes, cash offer? What do you mean cash offer? What's this about? And that might have piqued their interest. Right. But at this point, the recipients know what the distressed property market is about, and they've gotten that message. And so the veil's dropped. Right. So you have that approach, which may have worked previously, no longer does, right? So
you're so important, right? It's just like, it's not that when I say don't do this, it's because you don't know anyone who's ever, you're like, what do you mean? I know someone who bought lots of houses with that. When? Because it's like, it wasn't last week, right? So like with marketing, there are certain aspects of process or certain questions or certain ways you can frame things that when they are used to an extreme across the market, they lose their effectiveness. They no longer have the novelty that sounds like original conversation. Instead, it gives them the impression that you're any other person reaching out to them. You're no longer a unique individual, you now just trigger them with any other person who called them before with like a heavy accent making a low offer on their home, and then they said, yeah, we'll do that, and they never got a hold of them again. And how can you differentiate yourself? Differentiation in how you ask questions and how you run your process and in what you say is even more important in sales than marketing, because at least on marketing you can just throw enough money at the problem, you'll get stuff done. But in the sales, this is actually getting things across the line. And so many people think about it at sort of the top line of like getting the leads in, but then they follow the same old tired process. They might as well be a car salesperson rather than someone having a unique conversation to determine what is important to the person they're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the truth is, right, that anybody that's being contacted because they're within that distressed property framework or in that distressed property situation in their lives, they're going to need to take a discounted offer, right?
Yeah.
They're going to need a discounted solution. You know that. They know that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you want to make them, as we alluded to, you want to make them feel like it is their choice, that they've gone through the elimination process, that they've engaged with you and kind of led it in the direction that they wanted, that they came up with the deal that they ultimately took. Even if you had that number in mind before you sent that first text, right? Like you
Yeah.
still want them to get there. And it's important, right? Because you both want to end up at the same place, right? Like they want a solution for a home that they're out of solutions for. And you want to be able to get a good distressed property deal so that you can turn a profit, right? To get to that happy place, these kind of techniques that you've laid out, they get you there. They get you there fast instead of some of the, like I said, the logical things that have been eliminated over the last couple of years.
Yeah, we're huge believers in, I mean, it's anything in the sales process, but it's amplified with real estate, especially with distressed properties, which is that we are not the hero of their story. Like they're Luke Skywalker, we are the guide. We're Yoda. This is their journey. This is their story. We can point them. We can go, which path did you want to take? It's entirely up to you. And they go, I'm taking this right path. And you go, like, are you sure? You're like, I'm definitely sure. Okay. And that right path was the right path that we wanted them to take. But the sensation for them is that they are the hero of the story. So many people in sales are so ego driven. Like, heads up for anyone you see one's like, I'm the number one sales trainer, I'm the GOAT, I'm the best closer. It's like we train some teams that buy like hundreds of homes over like monthly basis, and we get them incredible results, but we don't position ourselves as we're the number one, we train the best, because we are of the belief that you are the hero. And if you're using our training, you are the hero. You still have to do the work, you still have to ask the questions, you still have to do the follow-up. And we want to have that level of like, let me help you to guide you to make your own decision and have your own journey. We want to have that process in talking to distressed property owners as well. If I can make sure that you feel like you came to the decision entirely on your own, and I just helped guide you in the right direction, first off, you're able to get steeper margins if you do it right. They're more committed to you, and like seller's remorse more or less goes away because they don't feel pressured into this, forced into a number they didn't want. They feel like, yeah, this person helped me realize that like time was running out and I was worried, or whatever the circumstances, I know I didn't have the energy to move forward. Yeah, I made the decision myself. One of the big things, my favorite lines I ever got in a solar appointment, which is again in-home consultation. It was different from acquiring an asset, but it was this. I was sitting across from a couple. It was the first time I had just read Never Split the Difference, so I was getting like carried away with some of the Chris Voss techniques, and I just decided, I was like, I'm going to do heavy mirroring this appointment. And this was like an old programmer. He was like an old nerd. And he was like telling me about like, I was programming in Fortran in 92 or something, which I have no idea the context of that. And I would go like, in 92? And he'd be like, yeah, you would. And he just kept on going. Like, we did this for like 2 hours. It was my last appointment for the day. At the end, he was like, all right, let's do this. Go ahead. And he just signed up because he felt so heard and listened to. I just helped him make his own decision. And I'll never forget, his wife at the end was like, I just want to let you know we're moving forward with you because we wanted to, not because you're a great salesperson. She had to like let me know that. And I was like, no, I hardly said anything. Internally, I was like, the reason you think that is because I'm a great salesperson. That's the whole point of me doing it right, is that you feel like you made this decision. If you
Yeah.
feel like this fast talking salesperson convinced me, I was not a good salesperson.
No, absolutely. All right. So and that just goes back to what we started this off as, right? Is closing the most possible deals out of the leads that you already have. Those techniques that earns you so much more with the leads that you're already sitting on, which is hugely important, right? So to wrap this one up, guys, it's Colin. I saw your question. Yes, we're absolutely going to send the replay to everybody who registered. I also posted a link to a Facebook group. So we just relaunched the Launch Control Facebook group. It's now the Investors Hub REI. And what we're doing with that space is it's not just for subscribers. So even if you're just really looking for solid REI resources, educational stuff like what Ian just presented, that's going to be there. And we also want it to be a place where, Ed, you can ask a question to Colin. Colin, you can provide the solution. It's investors networking with investors is the idea. So we're also going to post the replay there. And then you can, of course, if you want access to this actual document, Ian just reposted there in the chat. You send a text to the word call to 33777, and you'll get full access to that document as well as access to Ian and his team if you do want to take that deeper dive. So we'll open it up just one more time. If there are any follow-up questions, pop them in the chat. Otherwise, we're gonna wrap this one up and let Ian get back to his busy schedule. All right,
Any
y'all.
questions? That's the time to ask it. If there's nothing. No,
All right.
I'm
Well,
not seeing
thanks,
anything.
everyone.
Sure.
Much appreciated. Yeah, look for that replay in the Launch Facebook group posted above, Investors Hub. And Ian, thanks for your time, man. Really appreciate it. Amazing stuff.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks,
All
Michael.
right. Bye, everyone.